Now, Germany has always had a very ambivalent, if not to say bipolar view of Russia and the Soviet Union. We were at war with Russia for the greater part of the 20th century, 4 years of war in the First World War, 4 years of war in the Second World War, 40 years of war during the Cold War. On the other hand, there was always some kind of partnership, if not collaboration, and this has been touched upon before, the Rapallo complex, when German troops in the 20s trained against the Versailles Treaty on Soviet territory, of course the Hitler-Stalin Pact. So there's always the second side to German policy, that they can arrange themselves with Russian interest. And this, to some degree, on a much softer scale, of course, has been true after 1990 as well, and also especially during the crisis when the Russians took over Crimea and destabilized eastern Ukraine. So we have two camps still in Germany regarding Russia, and implicitly by this regarding Ukraine. There's one camp embodied by Chancellor Merkel at the moment, and by her predecessor, Chancellor Kohl, that is very based in a realistic worldview, very based on German interests, on values, and this is willing to cooperate with Russia as long as you don't have to compromise your own values, your own security system, NATO, and so on. This group at the moment is of course in control of Germany's Russia policy, and it's a control, of course, of the relationship with Ukraine. But there has always been a second group, also after 1990, that was friendlier to Russia. We even coined a phrase for them, which might even enter the international vocabulary, as was done with Ostpolitik and Realpolitik. It's Russlandversteher. Maybe some of you have heard this term. It's people who want to understand Russia at any price. It's almost an apologetic view of Russian views. This group has been there for the past 25 years. It was especially strong under the chancellorship of Schröder and the Social Democratic government, but it has kind of had a revival during the annexation of Crimea, which at the beginning, of course, stunned many Germans, but I was amazed how many Germans actually tried to be apologetic for what Putin has done. So where does this come from? Who is the embodiment of this Russlandversteher group? It's not only in the fringe groups. Of course, on the far right, the AfD, our new right-wing populist party, is very fond of Putin, and Russia sees him as an embodiment of a strong leader. On the far left, the successor party of the Communist Party, which we inherited more or less after unification of Germany, they are also still very fond of Russia, even though they don't have communism anymore, but old habits die hard. And there is, of course, within the Social Democratic Party, sometimes even within other parties, the Liberal Party, which has a strong economic wing, a good deal of people who can be classified as Russlandversteher. How come that these people actually find something attractive, fascinating about Russia? And there I have about 5 or 6 points, very quick points, and then I will conclude. There are more understandable, more comprehensible reasons why you want to understand Russia, and there are some more less understandable reasons. One of the more understandable reasons is the feeling of guilt. Germans killed during the Second World War about 27 million Soviet citizens, which very often in Germany is referred to Russian citizens. So there is this not very clear distinction. Ukraine, of course, paid a much heavier price in terms of a proportion of their population in terms of German devastation. But still, there is this feeling that because of our historical legacy, we have to cozy up to Russia. Then secondly, there is some kind of gratefulness for reunification, because this is more or less seen as somebody that Gorbachev instrumentalized. He was the leader of unification. There was even a wide wave in Germany in the late 80s that was called Gorbimania. People went wild on the streets when Gorbachev came to visit. So there was this outpour of thankfulness and gratefulness, and this is to somehow even transferred to Russia today. to a small degree understandable. The third reason, maybe the most understandable one, is economic reasons. Germany, especially big business, is very interested in cutting deals with Russia. So after the annexation of Crimea, for example, our head of Siemens Corporation, one of the industrial giants of Germany, went to the Kremlin to see Putin, and he called the annexation of Crimea and the destabilization of eastern Ukraine a momentary blip in relations. So we have to just go on as usual, and everything will be normal after this, slight distraction that we have had after the invasion. This has been a general approach of German, the economic class. Then the final point that I can somehow rationally try to understand is that there is some kind of a deeper soulmateship with Russia. Germans very often like to see themselves as the people of poets and thinkers, and deep thinking is something that is ingrained in philosophy and not this American pragmatism. And this they see embodied also in Russian politics. And then there are three reasons that are also very prominent, which I cannot really understand at all. That is that, for one, that pro-Russianism is seen as the other side of the coin of anti-Americanism. And there is some strong feeling in Germany that America dilutes cultural values, consumerism, globalization, and all these things that come from America is really not that what we want. So moving over to Russia, you can form kind of a new value coalition against the Americans. So this is the other side of the coin that very often plays a role. Two final reasons, and then I get to my final points. There is some admiration, Germans won't really agree with me, at least not openly, for the strong leader. There is a wide populist movement within Germany nowadays, as it is in many Western democracies, where these machinations of democracy that work slowly, that are not always satisfying, and that demand compromises, is not what we need in these trying times. So they look for a strong leader, and sometimes I hear in discussions with the wider public, at least Putin tells his people what road to take. And this finds some admirers in Germany. I thought we had come over that, but there still is some admiration. And finally, and this I say publicly, and I get scolded a lot for it, so be prepared to hear something outrageous, but I think Germans would scold me more than you would. The Germans feel more like being eye to eye with Russia. You know, in our relations with the United States, that has been our most important relationship for the past 60, 70 years, we were always the junior partner. The Americans were the überpower, the superpower, and the Germans were more or less the smaller sibling. With Russia, many Germans have the feelings we are at the same level. And from discussions with the public and so on, I very often get this feeling that the countries in between the eastern border of Germany and the western border of Russia are not really seen as independent nations or people and nations with own interests. Very often I hear, you know, you have to take Russia's interests into account because we are neighbors. And I tell them, no, we are not neighbors. Last time we were neighbors was during the Hitler-Stalin Pact, and that's not a period we want to be reminded of very often. So even these analogies very often show us that many Germans don't really focus very much on this region between Moscow and Berlin. And this is a big problem. So what does this mean? Three final points, Miroslava. What does this mean for Ukraine? First of all, I would say, don't take Germany's strong support for Ukraine in the fight against Russia for granted. Because there is a wide open debate in Germany about the subject. And there are different camps. At the moment, Merkel controls this camp. And Merkel has done a marvelous job also of keeping, and this is the was your first question, in keeping Europe and the West united through the policy of sanctions against Russia. Many people argue, the sanctions haven't really achieved anything. And they absolutely don't understand that the sanctions are a means in itself, because it's the only means that we have, the only instrument that we have as a political embodiment of our will that keeps the West together. Other than that, we only can refer to international law, and you know how flimsy international law is. We don't want to go to war. So sanctions is the only option as demonstrating our political unity against Russian aggression. The second thing is hope for Putin blundering in international policy as he has been blundering over the last couple of years. He has gained a lot of tactical victories, maybe the Trump election even, maybe Brexit, but there is a blowback in Western democracies and also in Germany. The group that I described as Russlandversteher, as people fond of Russia, are in the defensive because of Syria, because of the siding of Putin with the butcher of Damascus, Assad, of the hacking of the German Bundestag. These are also major blunders in Russian foreign policy. At the moment, if we had Trump in the White House and a more friendly, a more smooth Russian leader, I would say that many Germans would move over to the Russian side, seeing Russia as the natural ally and not any longer the United States. But with Russia behaving as it is behaving, outside of the Ukraine conflict, it's really making the worst argument for its own cause. And finally, pray. Maybe there are atheists in this room, but also pray that Merkel will head the next coalition in Germany, because she is your best hope. She will keep the shop together. If we had a social democratic chancellor, if we had a participation of the Liberal Party within this coalition, it would be a much tougher sell to stand up for Ukraine and support Ukraine. Merkel won't be there forever, but she will gain us another 4 years, and a lot of things can happen in 4 years. And things, I think, in the end, will not work out for Russia. Putin entirely miscalculated the reaction of the West. He thought we would be not united. Merkel proved him otherwise, and time is on our side. Thank you very much.